Hi, everyone, and welcome to Make Business Better from Quartz. I'm Seward. Last year, we took our company private, and Quartz was suddenly, after 9 years, an independent media startup, which is incredibly exciting, liberating, all that jazz, but it's daunting too. And so I've been turning all this the last several months for advice to executives at other companies that are working to make their slice of the business world a little better in some way and willing to come on this show and share tips that all of us can apply in our own work and lives. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about the state of small businesses as we emerge from the last year and a half of the pandemic, a pandemic that undoubtedly tested small businesses like nothing before. And our guest for that topic is Nicola Mendelsohn, who's the VP for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Facebook, which arguably interacts with more small businesses than perhaps any other company in the world. But as always, we're going to start with the Quartz essentials on the topic before we bring in Nicola. And of course, wanted to focus on some stats with these essentials with respect to small businesses. First, just the defined terms. You often hear the term SMB, or just small and medium-sized businesses, basically like everyone but the big guys. We're just going to focus on actual small businesses, and small means 500 or fewer employees. That's at least the U.S. definition that we'll use for the purposes of this discussion. And I just want to call out one or a pair of really striking statistics from a great field guide that Quartz did about small businesses in the middle of the pandemic, which of course I'd recommend everybody read in full. And it was talking to there's been a lot of talk about how the pandemic accelerated trends, and you can come up with an endless list of trends that were accelerated by the pandemic. One really important one, and obviously crucial to our discussion today, is the digitization of small businesses. So prior to the pandemic, 66% of small businesses said they had no digital presence whatsoever. It might be surprising because you're used to seeing restaurants and other small businesses with websites, but that is the minority, or was the minority. For most brick and mortar stores or small businesses that didn't have to rely as much on digital distribution or didn't feel like they had to. Pandemic, of course, suddenly changed those dynamics. And as a result, 70% of small businesses say they sped up their digitization during the pandemic. No doubt that is good news for Facebook, which I should acknowledge at the top obviously has a vested interest in having small businesses digitize and see the value in online advertising and work specifically with Facebook. But that also makes Facebook the perfect company to talk about how small businesses are faring as we start to hopefully emerge from the global pandemic that sort of upended so much of industry over the last year. So as I mentioned, our guest for this is Nicola Mendelsohn. She's the Vice President for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, responsible for all operations across EMEA, and has been at Facebook since 2013 and in the advertising industry for more than 2 decades. Nicola, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Zach. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you.
So let's get right to it. Facebook has done a few reports last year, and then there was a follow-up at the start of this year, trying to grasp the state of small businesses. One thing I thought was really interesting and notably different about this report than others you see about small businesses is that it's a global study, and that allows us, I think, to get a richer picture of what at the end of the day is a lot of different industries and types of businesses being lumped into one category called small business. So anyway, I want to get into what you found, starting with, could you tell us what the most alarming or important findings from the research that stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was actually a partnership that we've been running with the World Bank and the OECD since 2016 on the future of business. And we talk, as you say, to over 25,000 businesses across 50 countries every single month on a 6-month period. And we really did some extra dives in the last year, just given worrying and alarming the pandemic is, especially when it comes to small businesses. So some of the things you would see and you would expect, from gender disparity to concerns with rent and payments. We've seen closures and that by the end of last year, conditions had improved, but nearly 1 in 6 businesses still remain closed. We've seen businesses with reduced sales, businesses not able to pay their rent. And on the job side, a third of small business saying that they'd reduced employment in response to the pandemic. And then there's a whole area that we see around what I would call inequality at home, where domestic responsibilities, in particular, the burden has been greater for women, and it really hasn't improved over the pandemic as well, where, talking to businesses that are owned by women, about a third of them have said that they're spending more time on domestic tasks versus, about a quarter of male business leaders. So those are some of the things that we've seen.
Got it. I want to dive into those topics in a little bit more detail, and we could go one by one. So the job loss that you spoke of and business closures, obviously, we've all seen that with our own eyes wherever we've been holed up this pandemic. But I'm curious if there were trends in terms of the industries that were hit harder and or are having a harder time coming back too. There's the economic theory of the pandemic, to start was, all right, this is going to be really bad for businesses that depend on people walking into their shops and ordering food or having a good time in person, because that's not allowed anymore. But once that's allowed, things will go back to normal. We'll snap back. The macro stats suggest, it isn't a normal recovery. There was some bit of like snap, but we're hardly back, and it's going to take a much longer time to truly recover. So coming back to my question, where are the laggards? Like where are the remaining big problems in industries that maybe are slower to recover?
Yeah, we've actually found that that women and minority-led small businesses actually, as a whole, have been more disproportionately affected. Why? Well, they're more likely to have, micro businesses. Those ones have had higher rates of closure. They're less likely to have financial support. And they're also more concentrated in sectors which have been particularly impacted, as you were saying, by lockdown measures. And that's included things like services, you think of nail bars. And also at the same time, as I was just talking earlier, the fact that they've had the additional increased domestic responsibilities have also contributed to this pattern as well. But we also do see some resilience. And I guess necessity really here is the mother of invention. We actually also have seen that women-led businesses have showed a greater degree of flexibility in their business models in response to the pandemic. So women, female business leaders were actually 10% more likely to be developing an online website or presence during the pandemic. And they were much more likely to see more than 50% of their sales coming through digital channels. So technology has actually been a really good enabler to really level the playing field for businesses of all sizes, and particularly for women, because it does allow the access to the advertising and also the commerce tools that can really help small businesses to compete and succeed.
Well, this was the finding I wanted to go to next, so let's do it. Do you think those two stats are related, that the pandemic was harder on women small business owners, and that women small business owners have been more likely to adapt and pivot their business during the pandemic?
I definitely think they're linked. When you think about in total, I just think for some people it was just too difficult and it was just too hard because of some of those challenges that I set out. But I think for those that were able either to get some finance or were able to pivot quickly and to find new ways, I'm thinking about, the world over, all of the, the personal trainers out there that in the past maybe were training one-on-one. Actually, we've seen that many of them now actually adapted to doing, experiences like this, where they can actually teach to many and actually can make more money as a result, something they never would have thought possible before. So we have seen people through the necessity actually coming up with new and different business models and actually earning more money as a result.
A dynamic there that's going to be really interesting to see if it holds with respect to small businesses that's the situation you just described to me. It sounds like a local business all of a sudden becoming a global business by switching from you have to come to my studio and do the class in person to we're going to do it online. And obviously there's trade-offs. I don't exercise at all, so I'm not the one to say which is better. But I saw that for sure during the pandemic. And do you think a good deal of that persists? That small businesses that maybe had a narrower view of who their customer base was based on geography are thinking broader now?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, in the example that I just was sharing with you, it's actually a lady called Christina. She actually found her business actually became global. And again, she could never have imagined when she was doing training sessions. It was always the one-on-one. It was never the one-to-many in different places around the world. But Instagram allowed her to do that and to be able to grow the business by 150%. But it's not just training sessions. We've also seen it with people that historically maybe just sold on a high street with waiting for the passing trade to come by. Now with platforms like Facebook and Instagram, knowing your customer, you can actually sell to anywhere in the world. And so we've seen more and more of these businesses actually using digital tools to connect with customers and also to hopefully get more sales as well.
What are some examples of businesses that weren't doing advertising at all or very little of it, or digital advertising at least, that started doing so more in the pandemic?
Well, you name it. Literally, we've seen it.
Well, I know overall it exploded, but I'm thinking industries that maybe were sitting it out or were largely sitting it out, or types of businesses that is that just were prompted to jump in during the pandemic. I know, yeah. Overall, the story for digital advertising is obviously, I'm sure it kept you quite busy.
I've met so many. I can't even begin to tell you. So, okay, there's a fantastic company in the UK called Mendelsohn. It's a British jewelry brand. And they've got a fantastic Instagram shop. And Shops is a product that we launched in the last year as a response to the pandemic to allow small businesses to be able to literally create a shop. And we now have 1 million shops on our platforms and 250 million people visiting them every month. And Mendelsohn were able to drive awareness, but also to increase conversions. And they've created bespoke categories. They've made bestsellers. They've done collaborations with other people as well. They use e-com and also social media data to come together to define what categories that they should, actually prioritize. And, we've seen it with food companies. We've seen it with fashion. We've seen it with home interiors, you name it. We've seen so many different aspects of business and different verticals being able now to reach customers all over the world.
The one thing I could, or an important shift I could see happening if that trend persists, is a shift from small business largely, certainly not entirely, but largely being defined by geography and serving a local area, shifting from that to serving common interest groups, sort of regardless of where they are. I think of that in the context of, say, the first example you were talking about with exercise classes. Also true of tons of what I would have previously called restaurants, but now also food shipping companies and so forth. I guess I should start by, do you buy that? Is that a shift you see happening or expect to continue, or would you push back on that?
Yeah, I might push back a little bit because I think you could argue that all big businesses started as a small business once. And
sure.
I think what's so interesting as the world that we're in now, I think it doesn't matter what type of business you're in. If you know your customer, you might choose to be localized. So I'm thinking around things like services like nail bars or hair salons. There's still an option for you to be able to engage more with your customers and to make life easier for them in terms of utilizing personalized advertising. You can develop, create content through your audiences, your location, and you can get to know your customers so much better before they even step through the door. That's if you actually have a physical presence, or the restaurant that you talked about, which now might be shipping in a wider area, but largely still is geolocated, versus the type of companies that actually are able to maybe ship things out and sell to customers wherever they are in the world. So I think you don't necessarily have to be located by geography, but all big businesses do start small.
and start somewhere. Yeah, I guess the reason. I mean, this is clearly like where the you start to see the cracks in small business as a category. Since, as I said at the top, it encompasses so many different types of businesses and industries, including all the ones that are calling themselves startups, but still a small business at heart. But the reason I bring it up is that most small businesses serve local communities. And so I would expect that as things normalize, there is a choice for them to make, a business strategy choice, as to whether to broaden their business globally, go outside of the local community, or focus. And some of that has to do with the type of business, but it's also going to affect how they choose to advertise. I have to expect. And I don't know. I understand what you're saying, so I don't push my theory any further. But I am curious to hear like what you hear as you talk to small businesses about that dynamic. I mean, maybe ones that did go big or decide to go online only. Is that going to be a permanent shift for them, or are you expecting a sort of retreat back to local as things get normal and you can go out and have a good time in your own city again?
So I think often when we see the dramatic change of a new thing, we always assume that the old thing's gone. I don't think that's the case at all. So there is a place for being in person, testing and trying and having that wonderful experience. But what is definitely true and what has shifted in this last year is that I think shopping has actually shifted from being very online. Shopping online has shifted from being very functional. I'm typing in, I know what I want it to, and I'll get it, to actually something that I could discover. And so we have really seen a shift from a utilitarian mindset almost to a discovery mindset. And I've had it myself. I think about some of the purchases that I've made over the last year, that some of the things I didn't even know that I was going to explore and look for. And so I think we are seeing a bit of a collapse of the traditional purchase funnel. I'll give you my best one that still makes me chuckle, which was I was buying a present for my husband's birthday, and he loves whiskeys, absolutely loves whiskey. And so I was, checking and searching for whiskeys. And then in my Instagram feed came an ad for a small business that was selling whiskey flavored toothpicks, right? I could never have known that such a thing existed. And when I gave him the gift, and his expression was just like yours, he laughed. He was like, "How did you even think of that?" It was like, well, actually, I didn't. And what's wonderful now is that people can become aware of a new product or something that they didn't even know they wanted in just a matter of seconds, and you can click through and you can buy it. And so I think we are seeing that shift, which I think is really exciting, but in no way negates, that local, high street where people can go and buy things. It just opens it up to a broader audience.
Yeah, that's fair, right? I think it's interesting to compare them, but they are not necessarily competitive strategies. What could you define what you said a moment ago? I think I understand it, but probably helpful to make sure, and for our viewers, the flattening of the traditional marketing funnel and a shift from search to discovery. I mean, I get the example you're talking about. We all have that. We're flipping through, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, and all of a sudden a product I didn't think I needed is on its way to my house because it was a really perfectly targeted ad. But what else? So I get that that's the definition. So maybe the real question is, what else occurs as the marketing funnel flattens like that? What are the different? What has to change for a small business's strategy? That is.
Well, I think they need to be aware that people are actually looking to be inspired, and that's the shift, because we're really seeing that behavior is now really, really sticking. And that sort of slow courting process of the customer journey, I'll start to tell people about it, they'll start to be interested in it. That's changed, because you can literally, serve something up to somebody and they can move straight away into, well, actually, I really like that. I want to buy it straight away. And the wonderful thing here is that mobile marketing has really democratized advertising, because this commerce moment that we're seeing has really been opened up for both the world's biggest advertisers, but for the world's smallest advertisers as well. And so just for, a few dollars, a few pounds or euros, you can actually really start to connect in a meaningful way to the customers that matter to you. And this shift in discovery is not something that's unique to Facebook and Instagram. If you think about, I don't know, how you listen to music with Spotify, what they serve up to you, or the programs that Netflix suggests to you based on what you've looked at before. That curated discovery is something that's here to stay, and we'll see it in more and more aspects of our lives.
I've been spending, as we were talking about before we went live, most of the pandemic, well, literally here in this chair, as viewers of the show have come to know every detail of the living room behind me. But this living room is in the town of Bethlehem, Connecticut. It's a really small rural town in the northwest of that state. I've been thinking, well, one, I should give a shout out to Facebook. Nothing has helped connect me to this neighborhood, which was new in the pandemic for us, that better than Facebook groups. So there's a free shout out for Facebook groups. And I've felt a strong local connection, and there's good local media here too, but I'd actually say I'm getting better, more valuable information from those groups. And plug for Facebook groups, but shift to other things I'm thinking about as I drive through downtown and see the local businesses that serve a community here. I think about places like Town Apothecary, which is the one and only pharmacy serving Bethlehem. It's all, pre-pandemic, having nothing to do with the trends we're talking about, was already, I'm sure, under threat by consolidation in healthcare. Cigna's trying to get me to switch to their mail order pharmacy every week. For a business like that, there's a lot. It's going to be way more difficult to sort of follow the game plan you're talking about, like in spot. That they do well is know their customer, stay open at regular hours, and have the drugs that the community needs on hand to serve them. So, like things like inspiring the customer are sort of out of the question, as is a lot of the advertising tools that Facebook and other platforms offer. So I worry about them kind of getting lost, not necessarily because of the trends we're talking about. It may, again, I think it's a secular trend that began pre-pandemic. But what does Facebook and have to offer for small businesses like that are local and just are inherently local, but still, of course, want to reach more customers and build their business?
Yeah, so first and foremost, any business can have a page on Facebook that they can create for free. And, if that feels a little daunting, then I would say seek out someone who can help, because you don't always have to hire people. You could have, you could reach into a local community from a Facebook group. And I would stay curious about what the new skills are out there that people can have. And we've got hubs on small business to help people. And even if it's just that you want to put out there what your times of opening are, the directions of, where the shop is, I think keeping close to your customers, there's nothing more important than that. And here's the thing, customers want that as well, because it actually makes it easier for both sides. It makes it easier for the customer, and it makes it easier for the business owner as well to be able to help them. They're living in a disruptive period. And so I think we should really be open to what are the different ways that we could get out there and let people know about the wide range of products, with the example that you just shared, that we actually have available to the local community. And I really think we have seen this shift to the local communities. I think about, through the pandemic, how much closer I got to the street that I live in. We don't have a group, but we created a WhatsApp group where everybody would message each other and see what they could do to help one another. And I was in a wider group around protecting the elderly and the vulnerable in the area, and the volunteering that we saw was just extraordinary. So I think, yes, there's one thing is the role that the business can play, but also the role of community and how those two things can. That's something very powerful.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think about other examples in the same neighborhood where the Facebook advertising tools have been directly relevant to their transformation. So there's a lot of small farms around here. Similarly, that the struggle of building a business off a small farm predates the pandemic, and it's tough out there for farmers in Litchfield County. Several have either accelerated or pivoted their businesses to be more what you were talking about earlier, experiences. That you go to the farm with your kid and go through the corn maze and spend the day at the farm and also buy some produce. But the produce is sort of secondary. Anyway, that to me, and they're using all of the tools you're talking about to broadcast those experiences. That add as a pandemic pivot fits really nicely, I feel like, in the trends you're talking about.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Before we run out of time, I wanted to just ask one last question. I was deciding which one to ask. So we've been talking about, given where you're due for a living, most of it, like how small businesses respect to Facebook's various products and how that's played out over the pandemic. On a more personal level, I think it's clear that the pandemic laid bare aspects of society that were just not prepared to support what the pandemic wrought, and over here in the U.S. led to a lot of consternation about employer linked healthcare, unlike in UK, and with so much job loss, like how fragile the U.S. healthcare system became during the pandemic. I wonder what role you see for governments and policy to better support small businesses coming out of the pandemic. Are there or what small businesses are telling you when you conduct that research that they'd like to see change?
Yeah, and in many places around the world, governments have done a huge amount to actually help protect the businesses. But
sure,
unfortunately, not all businesses are going to be able to survive as a result of this. I think, I touched on a couple earlier. There will be more need for more stimulus. There's no question. And particularly, as I talked about, for women and underrepresented minorities who find it much more difficult to be able to access capital. And yes, I think people will continue to find ways to innovate and be creative, but government also needs to come in and actually really help to promote growth as well. And one area that I think, we talked a lot about the fact that there's a wonderful opportunity out there for small businesses to be able to look for customers in different geographies across borders. And actually the very essence of that is actually potentially under threat at the moment, because the ways in which businesses can safely and legally transfer data across borders is really critical to so many businesses. It underpins the whole of the global economy and actually supports many services that are lives. And so businesses need to rely on government to make sure that governments around the world can come together and make sure that actually that the safe transference of data across the Atlantic, from where you and I are at the moment, actually will be able to be possible going forwards as well, which in turn will allow millions of small businesses to be able to trade internationally, and of course people to be able to continue to work either from home or from their shops around the world as well. So it's kind of a big answer to what can seem like a small question.
But I like that answer a lot, not just because I agree, but also because I think, understandably, we've taken our eye off of what I'll just broadly refer to as privacy regulation, during the pandemic, because there were some more important things to focus on. But it was observed, and I certainly agree, that things like GDPR are, hard on Facebook, but you've got the resources to deal with, the changes you need to make because of GDPR, and actually it is likely to hurt smaller businesses that don't have the resources more. And as the U.S. engages in similar privacy policies now, state by state, which only makes it even more complicated, I really think it's incumbent on policymakers to get a better handle on whom they're regulating here, because obviously it's the Facebooks and Googles of the world that are portrayed as the target, and that's true to an extent, but it affects us all as businesses. And I could say, as one small business owner with readers around the world and a lot of privacy regulations to follow, that it's a huge burden. And I believe in privacy, so I want to. But I just want to make sure I'm doing it right, and the legal costs alone are quite enormous. So I appreciate that thought, and I'm also looking forward to talking more about non-pandemic issues as we are slowly emerge from lockdowns around the world. Well, Nicola, thank you so much for your time and insights today. Good luck getting back to work, and well, we're halfway through the year already, but I'm sure the second half will be even crazier than the first, given the way the digital ad market is looking. So good luck.
Oh, and thank you, Zach. And by the way, it doesn't feel like I haven't been working. I'm just doing it from one place, right?
Yeah, yes, of course. Yes. Good luck, and I hope you have a good rest of the day as well.
And you too. Thanks for your time.
That's it for today's episode of Make Business Better. But as always, we'll be back here next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. This will actually be the season finale of our first season of Make Business Better. And we're ending on a high note. We'll have Frank Cooper, the CMO of BlackRock, here next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Then I'm looking forward to taking some time over the summer to reboot, and we'll be back in the fall with the second season of the show, better than ever. So thank you so much for those of you who've been watching, and hope you'll tune in next Tuesday for our finale with Frank. And in the meantime, keep following us on all platforms, or at least one of them. Maybe Facebook would be the appropriate platform to follow us on, given today's conversation. I hope you have a great rest of the week. I'll see you next Tuesday.